Well, before we get too, down to business in terms of what's going on, who is Lightcast and what do they do?
Yeah.
Again, for those people who aren't aware of what Lightcast is, what it does, I know you talked about we serve enterprise, public sector, higher education, global, the combination of kind of public and private data sources. But what are some of the use cases? And thinking specifically, probably mostly in HR, let's be honest, because these are the folks who are listening to this podcast. Like, what are some of the use cases that Lightcast solves for the most?
Yeah. And Cole, feel free to jump in too if I miss any. But I like
I
to
get
think.
called on today.
Yeah, exactly.
Cara, I know kind of one of your evil curiosities of doing this podcast is you wanted a chance to ask me some questions as a part of doing this. Did you have any questions you wanted to ask me publicly and I'm not aware of what you're going to talk to me about today?
Yeah, I do.
Welcome to Directionally Correct, a people analytics podcast with Cole and Scott, and today's guest, Cara Christopher, Chief Marketing Officer at Lightcast, as a part of our HR Tech Voices series. Hey, Directionally Correct fans. This podcast is dedicated to you to help educate and entertain you on how to effectively do people analytics, workforce planning, talent intelligence, behavioral science, and understand the impacts of AI in the workplace. If you're looking to stay connected to the podcast, make sure to subscribe to Directionally Correct Substack newsletter, where you can read Cole's articles or watch the video of the podcast. You can also see video on Spotify or YouTube, or listen to the podcast on your app of choice. Feel free to check out Cole's new book, People Analytics, and everything else that's going on at colenapper.com. As always, all opinions are our own, and thanks for being a listener. Cara, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Super excited to be here.
Yeah. Well, before we get too, down to business in terms of what's going on, who is Lightcast and what do they do?
Yeah. Lightcast is the labor market intelligence company. We have been around for like 25 years, and I like to say that we were the pioneers or really created the category labor market intelligence. What that is we pull together insights from job postings, from career profiles, think like LinkedIn, and from government sources like the BLS and many, many others. And we collect all that data, bring meaning to it, and then sell it to customers that buy data to learn about the external labor market. Like I said, we've been around for 25 years. So we're actually a combination of two companies that some people may know. One was Emsi and one was Burning Glass. And we merged a few years ago and created Lightcast. And we have depth globally, and we serve HR practitioners that are looking at like job postings data to understand compensation bands for who they should hire and how much they should pay. We're selling data to higher education, who is using that data for curriculum alignment. So what should they actually be training their students for the future of work? And then last, we sell to public a policy to federal, state, local governments that are looking at their specific regions and making decisions about the businesses that are in their regions, and aligning people into those jobs. So it's quite a exciting company. I'm sure I can dive a lot more into that, but I just love that we have like such a wide breadth across what we do and serve so many different clients.
It's a fascinating organization. Why am I wearing a Lightcast shirt, Cara?
Yeah. So Cole, actually, are you at a year almost for joining Lightcast?
I joined last December, so almost a year. I guess when this comes out, it'll almost be a year.
Yeah, so excited that Cole has joined our team. I know on this podcast he doesn't necessarily speak and like pull back the curtain and talk about Lightcast, so I'm excited for this one to be the one. I'm actually Cole's boss at Lightcast, which is amazing. I am the chief marketing officer there, and like I said, like a year ago, we obviously part of marketing is looking at the different ways in which we show up to the market so that people like your audience knows who we are. And Cole, you had such a powerful voice in the market for how this data can be used, but you're also an amazing practitioner in your own right. And so we obviously started that conversation a year ago about you joining Lightcast. And yeah, fast forward, here we are.
Here we are. Like, I think it's like 42 data snacks later. I don't know. It's been quite a few. But well, again, for those people who aren't aware of what Lightcast is, what it does, I know you talked about we serve enterprise, public sector, higher education, global, the combination of kind of public and private data sources. But what are some of the use cases? And thinking specifically, probably mostly in HR, let's be honest, because these are the folks who are listening to this podcast. Like, what are some of the use cases that Lightcast solves for the most?
Yeah, and Cole, feel free to jump in too if I miss any. But I like
I get
to think,
called on today.
exactly. I like to think, like I said, we're bringing a lot of external data into enterprises, and so I like to think of us as the context layer for a lot of strategic decision making that happens in HR. I think really obvious ones are understanding the current and future state of supply and demand. So if you're like really in the strategic workforce planning, there's lots of side shoots that we could talk about for how you're setting up your decisions based on external data. Lightcast is also very strong in helping with skill-based transformation, and so we have a long used universal skill taxonomy that allows for just a common language to actually be brought into an organization and help them on their skill transformation journey. And then I'd probably just say, like, as HR is being required to be more data driven based on external factors, which we could talk about and speak a lot on, whether it's shortages or AI or just changes in industry dynamics. Lightcast brings that data to the forefront of HR leaders making decisions. So I'm sure there's more. Cole, what else would you add?
Well, the way I look at it is, and I think people fail to appreciate it. I say people because I failed to appreciate it, frankly, before joining Lightcast, is just the sheer breadth of data that we have, and then the depth on top of that. So you mentioned, the skills taxonomy. We also have the occupational taxonomy as well, the LOT. And then you're layering those type of taxonomies on top of 3 billion job postings, data from 165 different countries, over 1.2 billion job profiles. And it just, like, the volume, like, if you didn't go through this evolution because you've been more in the marketing space, but like 10 or 15 years ago, big data was all the rage in what was then called HR analytics, now what people call people analytics. And no one had big data. They talked about it ad nauseum. No one had big data. Lightcast has big data. And we have it on every nook and cranny of the entire labor market. And what has been so surprising to me working here is the amount of things like I can cover in a few weeks in terms of topics. We're going to talk about, Doge in one topic, and then we're going to cover defense tech in another topic, and then we're going to cover job postings here for AI. And it's just like every single major thing that shows up in the news, Lightcast has data and a perspective on it. In organizations, and myself included before joining, I just didn't realize that. Like, I think, we sell software, we sell, professional services, we sell a variety of things, but at its core, I say that we're a real data company, and that's what powers the whole machine, and that's what gets me excited about it. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, Cole. I think we oftentimes internally talk about, like, we're like a Lego company. Like, we have there's so many ways that you could put the Legos in combination to actually build something. And so years ago, when you created this company, would we have ever thought that we'd be supplying data at jails to help incarcerated people find their way back into the labor market and, like, understand how their skills actually translate into jobs? Like, absolutely not. But that's one example of so many. Like you said, there's hundreds and hundreds of questions that you can answer in your day-to-day as an HR leader using this data. So that's both powerful, but also can be really hard because we have to really define ourselves as the marketing leader in the areas that we can solve that obviously are a major focus right now for HR. So I think you've been talking a lot, and we've obviously been heavily focused on job architecture and how that's like becoming sexy again. But it's absolutely where our data is sitting in supporting that specific use case, which I think is exciting, but there's just so much you can build around it.
Let me build on that for a second because, and I want to come back to the job architecture point here in a minute, but just talk about skills, right? And I think you knew before I joined, and you were like, Cole, are you going to be cool talking about skills working here? Because the thing is, the way organizations, at least from my experience, have been approaching skills is what they did is they took, employee profiles out of their HCM and what like people's self-professed skills, and then they tried to make something of it for their organization, whether either on their own or through some technology they bought. And that was complete bunk. And so I had been kind of a skills negative person, right? And you guys were like, Cole, we've heard you're kind of skills negative. Are you going to be okay talking about skills at Lightcast? And the reality is, Lightcast, in my opinion, has the only unimpeachable way of using skills, which is looking at them objectively from an outside-in perspective from the labor market, based on the taxonomies, being able to be tied to a variety of other labor market information in terms of job postings, in terms of compensation, in terms of supply and demand, all of these different characteristics that, again, it takes an outside-in lens on this type of equation. And so I've been telling organizations, because I don't think they appreciate it, like, working in people analytics virtually my whole career, I always only had data within my four walls of my organization. And Lightcast is really one of the only providers that can bring the data in the context from outside of those four walls, because everyone in people analytics knows a lot of the data you have is just pure garbage. And so you're really limited in terms of the types of problems you can tackle and the types of organizational use cases you can support. And having that outside in lens, it just completely changes the equation on things like skills, and they can become relevant, in my opinion, for the first time rather than just being fluff, which is what I have seen in the past.
Yeah. Well, I think you bring up a good point that like the big data company of Lightcast, because they're like, to give practitioners a pass, there is a lot of junk out there too. There's a lot of companies that can say they do skills or that they do job postings, and it can be really biased. So obviously that's where it's important to really understand the breadth and depth and sourcing and the coverage. And we pride ourselves on having the most quality data because we know it's used for real decisions. And we go through arcs. I've been at Lightcast for 7.5 years, and 7.5 years ago, I was spending so much time in marketing to talk about the relevance and use of job posting data, which also back then had lots of questions of, well, this has to be biased because it's only what employers are actually asking for. They don't know what they want. But when you have such a big data set, you can really debunk that myth because you can see a lot of patterns and you can see how it's really useful. And skills are exactly the same, that like we're in that phase where people are starting to move beyond the, oh yeah, this can't work, to no, this has to work. And this is what we're going to need to actually get the signal. And I think, Cole, you mentioned Data Snack. You should tell the audience a little bit about what that is, because you get the opportunity once a week at Lightcast to explore that in reality. And I think it's maybe a good insight into like what you found.
Yeah, actually, I have a LinkedIn post coming out about this. It's going to be out by the time this podcast is out, but you haven't seen it yet.
Oh.
So this will be new for you, but it's called How to Create a Research Factory. And because coming here, and I think our audience will actually really appreciate this in terms of like how to use data that exists out there, is we had this deadline, much like a news reporter would have like a weekly deadline for their column. They just have to get it in, needs to be 2,000 words, needs to be on a particular topic, and it needs to kind of be punchy, And I feel like we once a week we're releasing a data snack about like any topic that frankly that's in the news, right? So something that's relevant, something that has impact, something that's important, but it cuts across the entirety of our business. So one week it can be about college students, another week it could be about what's going on in the public sector, and another week it's just about the tree of value, which we'll talk about later in terms of people analytics, talent intelligence, workforce planning, and behavioral science. And it's just fascinating to do this, but it's also, you get a lot of repetitions really quick. So if you're doing people analytics or workforce planning in an organization, you might do a big project that lasts 3 months or 6 months, and you might do 2 or 3 a year. Well, we're doing one of these a week, and so you really have to get good at distillation of large amounts of data to be punchy and be relevant once a week. And so I've been calling it lately a research factory. And I think if people are interested in learning about how we've gone about doing this, it's a fascinating concept. And if you want to learn more, definitely reach out to me after the podcast. But I've got a question for you. So you were talking about job postings and the value there. So we've got job postings, we've got profiles, we've got the LMI, the labor market information from all the variety of government sources around the world, including the BLS. What is kind of the value? Like, take us one level deeper. What's the value of that data, and how can people use it?
Yeah. So Lightcast, the holy grail for us is obviously bringing all three sources together, because you can show supply, demand, and you can map it back to standards like NAICS codes or SOC for some people that know what those are, in a way that people can actually use the data. And so that is obviously where we drive and deliver most of our data across. We believe that trifecta really should be like held true in all. But each of those has its own use cases and value in their own right. Obviously, job postings give us a really good view of demand in the labor market. But oftentimes that's where we spend a lot of time on data literacy, because you have to understand what that data is, because it has its pitfalls. It's not actually hiring data. So it gives a signal of demand. And so you can imagine there's a lot of use cases that can come from having that. Things like understanding competitive intelligence, like where your competition is hiring for. And actually a new product that we're delivering is gain and drain, with a lot more detail, so that you can understand how competition is maybe shifting their workforce models. So on the other side is profiles. So a much more depth into the supply of talent, but you have to look back at what is the source of profile data. Profile data is online career profiles. So there is some bias also in that data, and that it's not fully representative of the labor market or the blue collar specifically part of the workforce. So you have to pair that then with our what we call government or LMI data, which you can think of like any company in the world has to report data, especially in the United States, has to report data to the government. That data is all aggregated, and we pull it and find a lot of models that give a lot more specificity to it. So you can imagine all three of those helpful, useful in their own right, but Lightcast has long believed that our ability to bring them together and then build taxonomies and enrichments and classifications with them is where really the power of being able to find insight from the labor market is.
Well, you mentioned the concept of gain and drain earlier. Can you explain what that is, and kind of like we're making forays in kind of the future of what data visualization means? Think about things like Beacon and stuff like that. Can you talk about it all, what that looks like for us, Cara?
Yeah. So gain and drain specifically looks at a point in time when think of a company, you're looking at a company, and it's understanding what the makeup of their jobs were and what they are today. And we have a really cool alluvial chart. I wish I was showing it to you all, but you can imagine one that shows you really like in an aggregate way over a time period where that company has maybe been divesting or where they've been investing. So it gives a real pattern. And what's so exciting about this data is a lot of times companies don't see themselves this way. They don't look at that strategic level, and they're making decisions that are obviously strategic, but they're doing it quarter to quarter. And so when they start to push back and see how that's actually happened over time, it really allows them to be strategic. Also, like I said, it's a really good use case for competitive intelligence, because you can get a sense of, if I'm this company in this industry, I'm looking at another, especially with AI, like how am I stacking up to my competitors or differentiating to my competitors? So that's an example. But to your real point, data visualization is key. Obviously, we sit on a lot of data, but there's a reason we call ourselves a labor market intelligence company, because we really believe in our ability to provide intelligence or insights into that data. Because data is only so good as the interpretation. And we, mind you, have so many customers that are amazing data scientists in their own right that really want to get deep and interpret that data. But many that are HR practitioners that have busy jobs and need those signals. And so ability to have that data visualization at your fingertips is super important. Cole, I'll stop. But we're launching. I'll stop it in a second. But we're launching a new product called Beacon in 2026. We've done some teasers with early access over the last couple of months. But the goal is just that. We actually, with the help of Cole being in Lightcast, and we've identified specific workflows that are pretty common for Lightcast to be selling into. Think strategic workforce planning or talent acquisition. And we've purpose-built data visualization stories so that if you're a leader, what is your common workflow of data that you're wanting and needing to make decisions? So it takes us beyond report and data mining to like actually getting your answers at your fingertips. I'm super, super excited by it. And I think it will be a big part of the future of for Lightcast heads.
I am equally and more excited as well. It's going to be so awesome. And I think just from a historical standpoint, Lightcast has always been kind of the pinnacle of being able to filter data geographically. And with the recent acquisition of Rhetoric and the release of Beacon, looking at things from a company perspective too, thinking again about that gain and drain and the data stories that are going to come as a part of Beacon, it's just super exciting. So I always like have to belabor people with my title, but it's VP of Research, Innovation, and Talent Insights. And the innovation part of that title is that I get to work heavily with our product team, which is essentially code for I get to complain about all the stuff that I wanted to have as a practitioner and now get to actually build. And it's so cool to be able to do that. Little plug out there. Most people don't realize this. They don't know what it means, but like APIs and data shares, if you don't know what those are, go and figure out what they are, because that's basically all I use is just our raw data. It's awesome. And if you're not out there and you're looking and you're just saying, oh, I just want to see the way that it's visualized, that's great. And data visualization, I feel like, is the future, especially for the lay user. But if you're a data scientist at a top company and you're not using our data shares, like it's a game changer for sure.
Yeah, you mentioned that, and I kind of alluded to like the future of where Lightcast is going. Maybe I think there's two sides of that, especially the big hot topic everyone says, like, what is AI going to do to your company, or how do you think AI is shaping HR? And
what is AI going to do to your company, Cara?
Yeah, exactly. Well, so I think there's two sides of that. Obviously, I think we have to continue to, not everyone, especially the normal HR leader, is creating agents on their side on the side and like can actually do anything that has so much hype. So we still have to deliver those insights in like a fast, accessible, useful way. So that's still like an ethos of Lightcast. Obviously, do we provide insights that are AI enriched and like in the way in which we're starting to get more used to interacting with chatbots so that we can get those insights in like a super succinct, but also like flexible way? Yes, Lightcast is taking Beacon in that way. But I think the thing you just said, data shares, when we are at the end of the day, a huge, rich data set, and our data being delivered into literally like the backbone, the data lake of organizations, is where the future is likely going. And you can speak to that even more, Cole. Can you talk a little bit about like what you're seeing and kind of the future?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I even think about like, even if you don't want to use the raw data itself, we have a custom web application tool called eImpact that we can visualize the data for you. Or if, you're looking at skills, you've got Talent Transform, or if you've got, the traditional kind of labor market questions, you've got Talent Analyst. And so like, I feel like no matter what the problem is, there's a solution to be had out there. But I think the question everybody really wants to know, Cara, is Lightcast building the next AI chatbot of the future? Is that where we're putting all our eggs in the AI chatbot basket?
No.
Is that what's coming?
No, I mean, obviously we see those are different like accessibility lanes to get to the data, which is great in their own right. But what are we selling? We're selling the data, and the data is becoming even more powerful when it with the rise of AI, because we constantly talk about like garbage in and is garbage out. And so when you have good data, you're not putting garbage into an AI chatbot or an AI system. You're putting something of strength. And AI is really just, what's it trying to do in our world is trying to improve the layer of understanding at work. And so if that layer starts with Lightcast data, it's going to be really strong. If it starts with a bunch of garbage off of the internet, it's not going to give the right answers. So obviously I say that as in data is the future of where we want to go. We're very interested and open to our data being ingested by the many amazing companies in their own right that are going to build AI for their own company and what that means. And our data, we just want it to be at the center of that, because that's where it becomes really powerful.
Yeah, I mean, the way that I look at it is, do you think you're more likely to build the one AI chatbot for HR that's going to rule them all, right? That's going to be the winner? Or would you rather be the data layer for all the AI applications that are built in the future for HR technology and other technologies that use labor market information? And Lightcast has squarely gone with the second strategy. And so we already have a few use cases of other vendors that we're working with to basically be the data layer that populates that. And again, to your point about garbage in, garbage out, a lot of these tools, again, well intentioned, are just producing bad data at scale by using AI. Yeah. And if you come in with a highly curated data set like Lightcast has, with all the metadata and all the documentation and all the things that are necessary to have that context layer, to have that semantic layer that everybody's talking about with AI, guess what? It's already ready made for you. And it's, again, all the billions of data points that I mentioned earlier. And so I just think if you want to be AI ready, you need to be data ready first. And that's what Lightcast can provide.
Yeah. Yeah. Like building the chatbot, anyone can build that. It's not the value layer. And so, anyway, like Cole and I were talking to a group, and they were saying just how much the proliferation of all this HR tech is making, there's data everywhere, and it's really hard for organizations, especially large ones, to be able to like turn that into like a source of truth and be able to have their systems talk to each other. So Lightcast has long sat at a layer of, we have a really strong classification API and a strong skill taxonomy API, both of which allow for that use case to get unstuck. So the organization that was saying, I have 3 skill taxonomies in 4 different systems and none of them speak together. Lightcast is like, we have a taxonomy for that. And we put that right at the center. And it allows for those systems to not have to be rebuilt, start over. And it allows for that language to be all one so that they can build together. There's another, which is our classification API, super powerful technology that actually brings the ingestion of internal and external data get together, matches it so that we can actually pair them and you can start to actually build that external signal into your internal data. So both super powerful at the data layer aspects of what Lightcast does. Anything, Cole, that you'd add there that I'm...
No, I mean, you're showing the value of the breadth of the data that we have, and I think it's wonderful. I'm curious, where's Lightcast based?
Yeah, so Lightcast headquarters is actually in a small little town where I'm sitting in right now in Moscow, Idaho, which is kind of crazy. And then we have offices all over the world, from Canada to Italy to the UK to New Zealand and India. But yeah, Moscow, Idaho, where I am. Did you know where Moscow was on the map, Cole? Tell me if you did before you started here.
Well, the funny thing is, and I want to ask you about this actually. The funny thing is, I mean, I had never heard of it before traveling up there in December last year. But the funny thing is, when I told people that's where I was going, they only asked me one question, and that was, "Are you going to where all those people got murdered?" And so, what is Moscow known for, Cara, outside of Lightcast and the University of Idaho and the Kibbe Dome?
Yeah, well, yeah, I think you got them. Usually when I talk to people and they say Idaho, if they aren't associating with Iowa, like it's a win, Idaho, they know where Idaho is. And then the next closest thing they usually get is Boise, Idaho, which, but for those of you who don't know Moscow, we're 6.5 hours north of that, and in a completely different like actual time zone and climate and everything. So I'd say, yeah, if you get that far, it's great. And then unfortunately, I would say in the last couple years, it's now like Moscow, the murder, the murder hub. For those of you obviously that know, it's where the University of Idaho had those 4 deaths. So we are getting ourselves away from that connotation. But I would say in all of that news cycle, no one was like, this happened in this horrible town that no one loves. Like everyone was like, this horrible thing happened in like the coolest town ever. And it very much is. It's just that quintessential small college town. Like it has a cute little one street downtown where everything is catered to like good food, good coffee, like walkable, and there's students everywhere and it's a ton of fun. So
I hear they have good sturgeon fishing. Is that true, Cara?
Oh, and yeah, Cole's saying this because I'm like avid fisherman and hunter, and Moscow's like 35 miles north of the Snake River, so huge river that gets salmon and just salmon runs and everything, just like right at our back door, and they also have these humongous sturgeon fish, and they for every foot they're 10 years old, and so many of them are 9 feet long, so like over 100 years. Yeah, and it takes them like 30 years to reproduce, so they're like super, just these like old dinosaurs that live in this the Snake River. And so my husband and I, my 2 kids, we have a boat, and I'm telling Cole like, oh, we just sturgeon fish over the weekend, but they're protected species. We fish, you catch and release them, you get a cool picture, you don't pull them above the water, and they're just these amazing dinosaurs that live in the water. Super fun.
Yeah, I was like, that's like a historic landmark.
Yep.
My God.
Yep.
Wow.
It's cool.
Well, and I hear you went to PSYOP for the first time. So a lot of our listeners, Iowa psychologists, know what PSYOP is. You got to attend PSYOP. What was that like, Cara?
Yeah. And I don't mean this by like disrespectful at all, but I had no idea that this was an industry. And so when Cole was saying, hey, I'm going to be at PSYOP and I think you should go, it's a good opportunity to see different folks, and we'll get to connect. And he was telling me about the industry, and I'm like, oh, cool, awesome. I was literally expecting like, I don't know, a 200-person conference. No, a humongous world that was opened up to me. I didn't even know was a profession. Again, no disrespect. And like a total different language and like but one common denominator, amazing people. I got to meet Cole's old professors from grad school and friends, and obviously practitioners and great people in the industry. But yeah, no idea what PSYOP or IO was until this year, but I'm happy to know now.
What was like the number one question you got asked at PSYOP?
Not only PSYOP, but since PSYOP, like anytime I meet anyone that knows Cole, they like kind of like laugh and like, oh, what's it like to be Cole's boss? And it's thrown me off a ton, but Cole, I think I figured out why. Because like everyone's trying to figure you out. You're such an enigma. And like I said, I met people that like were your professor to like your friend in college to maybe people that just know you on this podcast. And so I think based on just also from huge teams you've run, large enterprises to like startups you've worked at, I just think you have like such a unique background and experiences that it's hard to put you in a box. So I think when people, they want to know the raw Cole.
So what's the answer, Carrie? You afraid to tell me? Come on.
Give it to you. Well, I think I had to figure out the why before I could answer, but no, I love working with Cole. I think now I can tell you guys, I can pull back the curtain. I would say that Cole is, as you can imagine, super, super smart. Every time we meet once a week, and he's often like, Cara, do you know so-and-so from like 1900 literature? I'm like, no. And he's like, oh, let me tell you, because there's a cool way that I'm going to pull this into the story, into our strategy. And it's always right on point. So I'd say he's just really, really, really smart. Cole also has a huge heart. I feel like he cares a ton, and that is for some people that can be Achilles heel.
Don't be telling my secrets.
It's a strength. I know. I was like, are you ready for this? But I think at the end of the day, Cole is I'm a marketer in an HR world, and he's an HR guy in a marketing world. So I feel like we pair together well because we're like learning each other's world. And at the end of the day, like I think we both are like strong in thinking big and visioning, but we also like love to execute. And I think we just have like a really awesome relationship and like respect to one another because of our like same work mode. So anyway, love working with Cole, who's been an awesome addition to Lightcast.
And I'm not just saying that because she's here, but Cara is a fantastic boss. And those who know me know that that's a big thing for me to say. So.
The question should be, what's it like? Yeah. It's like, how are you the leader of Cole? Anyway, it's been awesome.
It's like, how do you deal with this guy? Well, cool. Anything else you want to hit on, Cara, before we move into Cole's Corner?
I don't think so. I think if you have any curiosity about this data, like don't be shy. Like you said, Cole, we've purpose built this in so many ways that folks can access it. And so if there's any curiosity, I think Cole's a great person to even just like pick your brain with, because get a sense of what you can explore and look at. But nope, I don't think
And if you want to get early access to Beacon, again, reach out to me or Cara, or just feel free to reach out to the Lightcast team who supports you. But yeah, I think it's going to be fantastic. But are you ready for some Cole's Corner, Cara?
I'm ready.
Welcome to Cole's Corner. All right. So first we got some rapid fire. You actually already answered one, so I got to switch it up because I was going to ask you what is the best fishing spot in Idaho, but it sounds like it's the Snake River. So I can't ask you that. So I was going to ask you, what would you prefer between fishing or tennis?
Oh,
so and why?
Yeah, so Cole's asking this because I was a D1 college tennis player, and so that's like near and dear to my heart. I don't know, I probably have to choose tennis just because it's who I am at the core. And so it's funny because I played college tennis many, many, many years ago, and I had not picked up a racket and played in so many years. And the University of Idaho in Moscow, Idaho, we were just talking about the men's tennis coach and tennis team has been putting on this like free open clinic for the area and all ages. So a couple weeks ago, I like pull out my racket and I got my little 5-year-old and 2-year-old rackets, and we showed up, and this is like our 5th week. We're having so much fun. Just the kids actually really love it, and it's bringing back the joy that I've had for so long with tennis. So I'm back in the swing and bringing that joy to my children. So I'm probably gotta go for tennis.
That's awesome. And people don't know, but Cara is wildly competitive too. So I think it's interesting that you're able to kind of wear both hats in that situation. But
yep.
What's the place you've never been that you'd most like to go, and why?
Oh gosh. I've never been to Europe, and I feel like I just can't be like my age and never been to Europe. And so I'd love to go there because I think just
what part?
I know.
You gotta pick a place. I know. You can't say a continent. Continent is
I want to go
large.
to all of it. I think I'm like most intrigued by my heritage. So Norway or Switzerland, I feel like are 2 areas that I'd really be interested in as well. But yeah, I think like I'm from the Pacific Northwest. I grew up in Montana. Like our history lessons, which are so amazing and valid, are on like Lewis and Clark. And so even when I go to the East Coast, I'm like, wow, the history here, these buildings, just everything you can learn is eye-opening. And so I just can't even fathom all the history and like art and just beauty of everything in Europe. So yeah, I got to make it happen. I keep joking that like I had kids just so I'd like make them travel with me. And so they're almost to an age where it'd be fun. So it'll be on my bucket list.
I remember when I found out you were from Montana. And like the first question I ever asked you was like, "Oh, were you located near nuclear silos?" And you're like, "What?" That's such a random question to ask somebody, but
you would.
Yeah,
you would. No, now the thing is like, oh, Yellowstone. Which funny, yeah. I grew up in Billings, and I'm not joking, would go to Yellowstone like every other weekend. And so I'm like, there is some truth to that TV show. Like I used to live right there. All the like references to places or where I grew up. So it's funny.
And when you say the truth to it, I assume you're talking about the beautiful scenic views, not the
killings.
The strip that's much like a soap opera, right? Or is it
I don't think we kill people like every other week in the town, but yeah, it's obviously dramatized, but very, very good.
Okay. Well, Cara, why do you do what you do?
In marketing and life and what, Cole? Tell me.
This is a
Anyway.
rapid fire question. Every I guess it's asked that. I told you to listen
I
to some
do.
episodes.
Yeah, okay,
You
I love
clearly didn't.
that. I did. I just forgot this part. Um, I I'm just someone that like really loves to have an impact on things. And not like in any big way, but I just love to like see something work. I love to see a team come together and accomplish something. I don't know if you've ever done like Strengths Finder or anyone here is. I just have like I think achiever is the number one for me. I just really love to like achieve good things. That paired with like the work we get to do at Lightcast that impacts so many just individuals at the end of the day. Our mission is to open new possibilities in the labor market. And I really think of that as like making the job market work. And I get to see that every day. So both achieving great stuff and having an impact are things that really make me tick.
I love that.
Yeah.
All right. I got one big question for you before we get to what I'm reading.
Okay.
In people analytics, and I can attest to this, we have heard for years that it is similar to marketing analytics. And you mentioned earlier, I'm an HR person in marketing, and you're a marketing person marketing to HR people. Being the head of marketing, how do you see the similarities between people analytics and marketing analytics?
Yeah, I think it's so interesting because Cole, like the more I've got to know you, and we're going to talk about some of the things that you wrote, but obviously I've seen drafts of what you've written, and I can't like live in the world that you live in or the day to day of people analytics, but I know that I mentioned to you just how many similarities I see in marketing and the evolution of marketing. When I join marketing, like the iPhone was just being released or email marketing was going through like complete transition. So you can imagine how analytics started to be at the like just the depth of how decisions were made. Well, fast forward to I think the maturity, marketing's a little more mature than HR, that data is at the forefront of what I deliver at the board, what I deliver to our CEO, how I sit at the C-suite, and how I talk. And I think that's going to be a very similar evolution for HR of how data ends up being the first and the entry point and the bar and the expectation for HR leaders. And I'm going to see that transition because a lot of it's like how it's accessed, how it's understood, how it's used, how it's closely tied to business outcomes are all things that I've faced in my like 15 years in marketing, and luckily got to see that really have staying power. Whereas it's rare that you would look at a marketing organization and not see that you'd have marketing analytics as a key, like number two to the C-suite. And I see that like HR, you look around and it's very common in small organizations to not see people analytics, and I think that data and that norm will change.
Hey friends, Marnie Robbins here, host of Vibe Makers, a podcast now on the Work Defined Network. Look, we all know workplace culture doesn't come from a slide deck. Gross. It comes from people. So on Vibe Makers, I talk to the folks shaping the experience of work from the inside out. You know, the HR and people ops folk, founders, leaders, and misfits building culture through small bets, big beliefs, and a whole lot of trial and error. No fluff. Well, maybe a little fluff, but mainly just candid talk about what happens when you stop duct taping your culture together. Come check us out. Listen to Vibe Makers wherever you get your podcasts.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
No, I love it.
Yeah.
Well, let's do some what am I reading? I actually wanted to start first because I mentioned that my role is actually a research role, and it's weird that it sits in marketing, but we actually do some pretty cool stuff. And so actually, will this show? Well, it's not showing up. Let me, I'm going to share the website rather than the report, but I wanted to start with some of our research on the Beyond the Buzz. This was a recent report that we did talking about AI and its impact on the workplace, and perhaps why some of the headlines related to AI were more buzzworthy than actual substance. And so the three main points of this that I'll get into here is we found that an AI job does not just mean a tech job. Over half of the job postings in AI were skills outside of IT and computer science, and that AI skills mean higher salaries. So salaries for postings with AI skills make 28% higher on average than postings that do not, which equates to about an $18,000 increase per year. And then the third finding was every career area has a different stage on its AI adoption. And so, it's not like it's impacting every occupation the same. Some are being impacted more than others. But I think like the job posting area that had the biggest increase, I think only 13% of IT and computer science job postings actually had AI skills within the job description already. And so it's clearly, and then there's some that there's literally like 0 to 1%. So it's not making an impact at all. And so I think this was a really interesting piece of research. Obviously, we're distilling like 100 pages of information down into a short amount of time. But what was your experience doing this research, Cara, and what did you think about this research report?
Yeah, I was. So why did we do this? I think is like the first part, and then I can talk about my favorite parts. But it was hard to find signal in all the noise, and especially even the data that we can look at. It's a lot of like, oh, AI is growing. Oh, AI is large. Oh, AI is on all these countries. Oh, it's in all these areas, but it just wasn't really giving any so what. And so the more and more we deliver data on how AI is shifting, the more our organizations, whether you're a curriculum designer at a university or you're in people analytics, they wanted the so what, like what can we do today about this? So of that data that was kind of like buried even from like the main headline was this really cool AI disruption matrix that we did. So it looked at, close to my heart, a bunch of career areas, but one being marketing, for example. And we looked at the skills that make up the specific marketing career and which ones are being heavily disrupted by AI. And it was just so helpful because that's now we can make action out of this. This is where I can understand the quadrant of where things are really growing so that as I'm in L&D or I sit at a university and helping with curriculum design, I can really start to pinpoint the areas that need attention. Even as a marketing leader, I could say, okay, I know, obviously this is an obvious one, that like SEO, search engine optimization, is changing, but for that to be number one, it definitely makes me focus in on my head of SEO to be like, what are we doing? How are we changing this way? And make sure that I'm giving the tools for that specific career area. So I love at the end of the day that we brought some real action to all this hype. I think that, and just honestly, the salary premium and the, like, it has moved beyond tech. So the fact that we had all these career areas that are really, truly the shift of AI is happening and acute, I think gave the ahas that people had been needing to see. What about you, Cole? You speak on this a ton. So anything that resonates with you that you really enjoy?
I really wish I could pull it up because like the report for whatever reason is not working on the streaming service I have. But the AI disruption matrix for HR is fascinating. If you haven't downloaded the report, go download it, if not only just to see that, because one of the things that shows a 2x2 plot based on based on all these HR skills, on their growth in the last 5 years, and then their value to HR. And if you look in the top right-hand quadrant, people analytics is there. And it's actually the most valuable skill in HR according to Lightcast data. But the irony is we also put a color on the chart. And the color was most to least likely to be disrupted by AI. People analytics was one of the highest growth professions. It was the most valuable skill, and it was one of the most likely to be disrupted by AI. And so I thought that was a fascinating finding. I've wanted to talk about it on the podcast 100 times, but I was like, I'm going to wait till Cara is going to come on here and we can talk about it. So I really appreciate you bringing that up, Cara. But it's really cool, the kind of data and access and research that we have access to at Lightcast. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, let's do the next one. This one is a funny one for me because upon writing it, you were like, Cole, what do you got? What are you talking about? And so I wrote an article called The Tree of Value. It's about uniting people analytics, workforce planning, talent intelligence, and behavioral science. And I call it the Tree of Value, which is all connected by the roots of the tree, which are the value of human capital labor data. And so these four distinct professions, talent intelligence, workforce planning, people analytics, and behavioral science, they're all very similar, but they don't recognize that they're kind of brother and sister functions to one another. And the reason I go by and I do sort of a history lesson to explain why that is. And it's because each of them has a different origin story and started in a different area. And so if you take behavioral science, that's, thinking of like psychology starting over 100 years ago with like Hugo Munsterberg, Frederick Taylor. Taylorism was a very common thing back in like about 100 years ago. Workforce planning started in the Department of War, which I guess is being called that again now, ironically. But in World War I and World War II in the United States, workforce planning started there and then matriculated through the federal government and then into the private sector. People analytics more came around when organizations were moving from like paper and pencil and filing cabinets to online, having the access to kind of digital data for the first time. And they wanted to get value out of that digital data. And so people analytics kind of came into the fore then. And then talent intelligence mostly actually came out of like executive search and executive recruitment and sourcing. And so they're all using similar data sources and similar kind of tackling kind of somewhat adjacent problems, but they don't realize that they're fellow travelers on this journey. And so I wrote this article to talk about how they're all branches of the same tree and how there's even sub branches on each of these, but that if we really want to have maximal impact, we would be pooling our resources to share the value of the human capital labor data in terms of the roots of the tree here. But I share all that to say, what were your thoughts on this one, Cara, and why did you find this one interesting?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, I said that you have like a superpower and that you're well read on all this history. And so I think your ability to bring that together and bring meaning to that and give a reason for everyone to understand why did we even have these in the first place and where they come from, and bring that back to a super interesting analogy like the tree, I think is really strong. It's really resonating. You've spoken about it a ton. It's I think a core part of your book as well. So I think it obviously is foundational. And like I said, similar to the evolution of marketing and the growth and the use of data, I can see that transformation happening in HR. Obviously at Lightcast, just how we sell to use cases into these functions has rapidly changed just even over the last 5 years. So I see a lot of change that's happening. And obviously this point in time and what this is looking like, I think is just a really smart encapsulation from you. So if I might push the question back to you, how do you see this as a future? Like, how do you see these trees if you had to look 5 years from now? What would
it's interesting. I actually got asked this at People Analytics World in New York last week on stage, because I was talking about this a little bit. And I think there's this narrative being put forward, frankly, from a cost cutting perspective, that, people analytics needs to kind of verticalize in the sense that it needs to combine with like data infrastructure with HR strategy and, become kind of just like a full stack technology focused function. And I would say that might even become a little bit devoid of having business impact. It's just going to be kind of the plumbing of HR, right? And even sometimes they want it to become kind of the plumbing of all functions, where they create like an enterprise analytics function that has all the analytics and becomes all the plumbing of the entire organization. And I think that'll be fine for probably some organizations. But I told the audience, I just wanted to create a countervailing force that says, what if you took an impact driven focus to how this would be done, and what functions would you combine together to make the most impact? And I think kind of combining these four into kind of a singular function is where I think things could go, especially in an AI driven future where the roots of that tree become more, built in and are scalable products at scale with AI. I think that that's really going to be a key of the future. And again, you highlight that was in the 3rd chapter of my book. I talk about that extensively. Another kind of interesting Easter egg that's in here that I don't think a lot of people noticed, but was a fun project for me, and again, a testament to Lightcast data, is if you go look up the Tree of Value article, which we can link to in the show notes, there's actually a little, we created a web app, like a e-impact website, web application that shows all the people analytics profiles and job postings and workforce planning and talent intelligence that's live. And so at any time you can go into it, and I look at it pretty frequently, frankly, just to see what are the new job postings. Is the field shrinking or growing, or more people going into it or not? And this is live for anyone to see, and it's free into perpetuity. So go check that out. And most people didn't realize that was in the article, but I stuck it in there as a little fun aside for everybody, but that was pretty cool.
No, I love seeing that data, and because it's, again, that external view with a large historical data set that you can start to see that transition. I also give you kudos, because why did Lightcast put this out? There's obviously it comes back to what we said earlier, but external data is not yet a must-have in every HR organization. But I think there's a real case to be made as you see how these how these organizations are interplaying with each other, oftentimes using different data sets, how external data can really be part of that root system that allows the interplay to come together. So we see that a lot with some of our clients that are really ahead of the game and bringing these functions in the forefront. But I think it obviously is a point of view we have too. The more you can bring that external contextual data across your functions and through, the better that you're going to be able to articulate it.
Yeah. And the name on this is still being workshopped, but I've actually got an article that may be out by the time this comes out about outside in strategic workforce planning, because I think that that's going to be the future of how this work gets done. But this tree of value was super interesting. Alexis Fink was on the podcast not long ago. She wanted to talk about it. I was like, we got to wait to talk about it till Cara gets here. But we did a webinar a while back, and Alexis was on there. Toby Coleshaw, who's on the Lightcast team now, represented talent intelligence. I was people analytics. Alexis was behavioral science. We also had Adam Gibson from EY, who wrote the book on agile workforce planning. So really stellar group. But the next thing I wanted to talk to you about, Cara, is job architecture is the yellow brick road. So this was an interesting one. I got the opportunity to do a webinar on behalf of Lightcast and speak at the IPAC conference earlier this year on what I called how to do job analysis at scale. And if for all the IO psychologists out there, that really made their ears perk up, because doing job analysis at scale has kind of been the bane of their existence for 100 years. And so that's sort of a provocative thing to say. But what it was really outlining is, what is the data that you would need in terms of task, knowledge, skills, abilities, and other characteristics, and how AI would play a role in the ability to do job analysis at scale. But then how would that lead to having the job architecture for organizations agile enough to be ready for all of the AI workforce transformation that's going on, and how labor market data and Lightcast could help in that equation. And so again, I introduced the tree of value here. What's the value that the roots of the human capital labor data? Talked a little bit about how Lightcast can play a role in terms of the bill, buy, borrow, bot, and then what role that the task and KSAOs play, and then introducing Lightcast skill agents and how that plays a role in the ability to make your job architecture not static, but more dynamic, and so that it can live up to what's going on in the world, and Lightcast skills ontology and knowledge graph capabilities. So this was a fun one in terms of just taking something extremely practical and nuanced like job analysis, and then overlaying it and to say, how is this, the capabilities that we're building in this space, making job architecture more dynamic, and where is the yellow brick road of that job architecture leading HR function as a whole? What did you think about this one, Cara?
Yeah, well, kudos to you. I think you brought a really fun but relevant analogy, not just because Wicked 2 is coming out here in a month, but
I totally didn't even know that, by the way. And all the people at work who are into that kind of thing, you're like, it's so untimely for Wicked, Cole. That's amazing. And I was like, I didn't even know.
Come on, Cole, just pretend you know. Maybe it was like subliminal. But anyway, I think
maybe their marketing was working on it.
Yeah, I think it's really good. Obviously, I think you're pulling back the curtain of what we are doing day to day with our customers and the problem that we're really solving to get into like how skill transformation actually gets done, and it starts here. And what we've learned over time, and obviously where we're taking our product roadmap to making that be more updated, so you don't just build this whole thing and then you let it sit and forget it. And we've built this with real organizations over time that have needed to do this and have seen it in practice. And so I think you just did a really nice job of like bringing it back to the forefront, demystifying all like what is skill transformation, and getting to the brass tacks about what actually matters here and what people are getting done and how Lightcast is supporting it. So
yeah.
Nice job.
When it was interesting doing that webinar, because we got to bring in, it wasn't just focused on HR, but it was focused on the public sector as well, bringing in, Dan Putka from Humro, who again, PsyOp fellow, just an institution of himself, like a brilliant dude. We had Alex, I can't remember his last name, but he's at Nestle. And then we also had Dr. Chris Laney, one of our internal social impact economists, who really, again, gets to kind of triage the difference between how is this going to impact, jobs and enterprises, but also, frankly, how we structure municipal, state, and federal government. And so I thought this was a fascinating one as well. But Cara, I know kind of one of your evil curiosities of doing this podcast is you wanted a chance to ask me some questions as a part of doing this. Did you have any questions you wanted to ask me publicly, and I'm not aware of what you're going to talk to me about today?
Yeah, I do. I just feel like you wrote the book and you have a podcast.
I did write a book.
Yeah, because you have just such a way of kind of getting through the crap and saying what's like going to happen. And I feel like you have a really good idea of like what the future of HR is. So my question is on that, like, what do you think the future of people analytics in HR will be if you look out 5 years?
Yeah, and I talk about this at length in the book. And again, this is all dependent on my own kind of deductions. And so I like to say I don't like to make predictions. What I do is I like to kind of look at the like, as things currently stand, what could you logically deduce would be the first order, second order, and third order consequences of that. And one of the things that I see is I've kind of started making this decision tree of HR. If you look, let's say 5-10 years in the future, and there's really 3 branches on the tree. There's HR doesn't change at all, which sadly is a pretty, maybe not the most probable branch, but probably the second most probable, which is sad. Then you've got AI high disruption and AI low disruption. And I define AI high disruption as like AGI gets invented and, we're all out of jobs and maybe HR doesn't even exist anymore. I think that's actually the lowest probability thing to happen. And then I would say AI low disruption is the highest probability. So it's like all the technology, the thought experiment, I've shared this with you internally. The thought experiment is this: what if AI doesn't get any better, but it just proliferates more throughout the function and it gets cheaper and faster and more reliable, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that is very plausible and logical, and you could deduce what would happen. If that happens, what I think is going to happen is the function of HR itself, many of the transactional repeatable tasks that the function goes through, which whether we like to admit it or not, is a lot of what HR does, they're just going to go away a little bit at a time. And I think functions that are data native, that are AI native, that are change management in their orientation, and frankly have the aspirations for leadership, are going to be the functions that transform the future. I do not think that the HR business partners of today are equipped to lead the HR function of tomorrow. I just don't. I know it's very provocative to say, but I just don't believe that that's true because they don't have those skills I just mentioned. And I think people analytics is the function that is most well positioned. I think it's going to be rebranded, though. I think we're already starting to see this either as one of two things: is AI workforce transformation. But again, I think the term AI eventually is going to be like internet. People don't call it internet workforce transformation. They just call it transformation, right? And so I think eventually you're just going to call it things like work intelligence. And I think work intelligence is going to be the future of HR. And I think people analytics is going to be right at the fore. But the key thing that I think is missing sometimes is that aspiration for leadership. If people analytics has that aspiration for leadership, I think they can make that change. But I think that's going to be a journey that the function goes on itself, because sometimes, frankly, I think it likes to kind of be a back office function that, doesn't really want to be in the leadership role.
Yeah, really good stuff. I love hearing it. Okay, I have a couple more questions. One that is, so obviously I feel like this podcast has a major focus on labor market data. And so I feel this data has been...
Especially when you're here.
I know, right? This one. I feel that data has been accessible for many, many years. Why do you think now organizations should be using external labor market data?
Well, I think there's 2 parts of it. One is, and again, I consider myself like a 99th percentile consumer of being aware of what's on the market. Mm-hmm. I myself still didn't completely realize, and I don't think this is just about Lightcast. I think it's all the labor market intelligence providers. I still didn't fully realize the capabilities that I had access to if I were to use that data in the past. And I had been a previous user of some of these tools. And so for me to say that, I think says a lot. And this is, again, why I said earlier, like the data focus is so important. But as we go into the future, again, you mentioned it earlier, and it gets mentioned almost so often that it's like a platitude, but it really matters in this occasion. It's like the garbage in, garbage out. Ever since People Analytics created, we always talked about you need to have good data infrastructure. You need to have it ready to be scalable. You need to have accuracy, high quality data with the right labels, the right architecture, all of that stuff that goes into it. And then we just never did it. Or like let's say 100 organizations actually spent the money to do it, and every other organization was in shambles, right? And they were just doing their best. And the reality is, I think with providers like Lightcast, or I would just say Lightcast, that those days are over. Like, I think, again, that's why I'm writing this article about outside in strategic workforce planning. I think you can just leapfrog things that you used to, I always say at a minimum, it would take you 2 years to get your data infrastructure in order. And I just don't think that that's necessarily going to be true in the future with providers like Lightcast and the data that you have accessible to you. And so I think it's going to fundamentally transform the equation of People Analytics always spent like 80% of its time getting its data right and 20% of its time on adding value. And I think that equation is going to get inverted, where it's going to spend 20% of its time trying to get its data right and 80% of its time adding value. And I think that's a really, really exciting future. And frankly, that's why I wrote the book, is to talk not just about what that future could look like, but how to execute once that happens. Because I always heard this quote, always bugged me, is people would say, we need to automate some things so we have more time to be strategic. And I always wondered, what do you mean when you say be strategic? And I think that just meant that we could take longer lunch breaks or something. I don't know. It always really bugged me. And so I wrote a book on exactly what does it mean to be strategic and what would you engage in, just so that it's not an ambiguous topic where we all just, sit around and lollygag. Once we get more time on our hands, we actually go and make an impact on organizations. And I think that's what's exciting.
Love that. I like thinking about that too, about how I really see data that'll be activated, not just analyzed, to your point. Like, it's going to be at the point of decision, not just there so you can sit and research, and so that we can all be strategic. So that's awesome. Okay, my last question is, how is it working for Lightcast? Has there been anything that surprised you since you joined us?
No, I say this not because you're here. I actually say this privately a lot at work, is the thing that's so special to me is even the person, like, let's say I like the least at Lightcast is a really, really good person to work with. Right. And I love almost everybody I work with. And it's just a delight to work there, because that has not always been the case in my career. And you can even go back through places I've worked since I've been on this podcast. And it's always like through clenched teeth, I'm like, I love working here, like that kind of thing. And it's just really awesome. The other thing I would say is the thing I appreciate about you in particular, but the company as well, is just how supportive you guys are about giving back to the field, about taking new and innovative ideas and saying, let's try it out. Let's go lean into discomfort and do something cool and new. And frankly, just having the ability for me to have a voice, right? A lot of places I've worked, that was seen as like dangerous, or you needed to get lawyers in the room to make sure. And some of the presentations I've given, I was actually joking about this at People Analytics World with some folks. It's like, if I were to give this same presentation at a prior organization, I would have had to cut out half the slides and getting 17 lawyers to sign off on it. And in here, I was like, Cara, do you want to look at my presentation? Like, you got this, Cole. It's going to be great. And I'm just floored by the lack of oversight.
It's called trust, not oversight.
I know.
But you've proven that.
Again, when you grow up in corporate America, it doesn't feel like that. It's like you feel like, oh, I don't know what this oxygen is thing. I've never had oxygen before. What does it feel like? And so it is just amazing working at Lightcast. I don't know if it's like that working at every vendor. I've worked at one startup before. Again, I got a lot of visibility there, but I would say, frankly, when you're a startup, there's no oversight for anything. Whereas Lightcast, I think you guys are like the tried and true leader in this space. And just having that trust, like you said, is just magnificent. So I really appreciate you having me and allowing me to do this kind of stuff, Cara.
Nice. I love that. And I definitely think your sentiment is like very similar to my own. Like at the end of the day, which where you bring it back to HR, it's like you just want to work with good people. And I feel like we have a lot of fun and we work with good people and we prioritize innovation. And that's all the stuff I love to do, like do cool stuff and work with good people. And so anyway, bringing this function into the front, obviously, like working around people is the heart of why we do what we do. So it's great.
Well, Cara, it's been fantastic to kind of be on the other side of the table today. Hopefully it hasn't been too hard for you.
Well, it's fun. You made that, obviously you make it fun because I'm comfortable with you. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. So thanks, Cole, for having me.
Well, I got to be honest. I'm super excited about the audience to hear this. I'm also really excited about to share this internally at Lightcast for the folks to see it because I think they're going to really love this one. So I think I really appreciate you being a guest, Cara, and I think you're an awesome boss. And I'm not just saying that because you're here.
Thanks. Back at you, employee. So love it.
All right. Well, you've been listening to Directionally Correct, a People Analytics podcast with Cole and Scott. Today's guest, Cara Christopher, the Chief Marketing Officer at Lightcast, is a part of our HR Tech Voices series. Thanks for joining me, Cara.
Thanks.